Welcome again to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, my name is Steve Lacy.
And my name is Phil Thompson. We come to you every week with this wonderful podcast that we've been doing for about 28 years. And we're glad to have you here with us again. We're a company that does, when I said 28 years, I was just kidding. But we've been doing it a long time. And this is like well over 200 episodes. And as we mentioned, I think the last podcast, Steve, we actually were doing this about 10 years ago with video. And so we were ahead of our time even back then. Now everybody has a podcast, right?
My son would hope so.
Yeah, everybody has a podcast. And but we've been doing it for a while, like we have everything else. So anyhow, enough blowing our horn. What am I doing here? Oh, we're a company that helps churches and ministries use technology, and we do streaming video. That's our main deal, mobile apps and church management stuff, and doing it since 2001. And so Steve is our wonderful founder, CEO, and wears a crown. Usually doesn't have it on right now, but you can put it on later. And anyhow, we're glad you're here. And we have a sense of humor, as you haven't figured out by now. And we talk about things besides just tech stuff. What are we going to talk about today?
So next week, we should talk about the article I suggested that we talk about. But today, we're going to talk about best pastoral practices with church finances.
The best, the very best, nothing but the best pastoral practices when it comes to handling your church finances. That's right. Yeah. We've got about 5 points here, I think, to bring up.
Yeah. I know that I have some history with bad pastoral practices with church finances.
Oh, do you?
Yeah. I mean, not with my current church, but the church I was with in California.
Oh.
Yeah, we did some things that probably would have violated some of the rules here.
Oh, so, like what? Tell us. Give us all the dirty laundry here.
Part of the problem that if we're going through some of these pieces, but anyway, the pastor was very interested, and this is not necessarily a bad thing unless it has bad consequences. But the pastor was very interested in who was giving what.
Okay.
And then became very influenced by that, and made some poor, ungodly decisions based around that. I mean, it's just kind of innocent kind of a thing, but, found out, oh, here's a big giver. And the big giver was not shy about it. They take the pastor on vacation trips to Hawaii and some other things. And so they were not a strong believer, and the pastor moved them into positions of prominence, and it didn't work out well.
I've seen that happen with a local church here in town. Definitely seen that happen. In fact, I remember the senior pastor saying he had regrets. This is many, many, many years later, regrets about some things. But there's differences of opinion on that. There are some pastors that believe they don't want to know anything about anybody giving. They don't want to know what anybody's giving. And then there's another viewpoint, is that if you are considering somebody for leadership positions, you want to at least know that they're supporting the church. You may not need to know the details, and you probably shouldn't know the details, but you should at least know, hey, are they supporting the church financially?
Yeah, well, that's very prudent biblically.
I think so. I think if there's somebody you're considering for a leadership position, the money is not the number one thing. But if they're not supporting the church financially, okay, why aren't they? I mean, do they have a problem with something? Or so that's where I think that's where I would be at on that thing. But anyhow, trying to think of any examples. I just know from one church I was a part of, we used to have a gal that was, and we can get into this. Let's just get into the deal.
Yeah,
I'll give you the examples. So,
right, because
we're just rambling on here.
Yeah, we got 5 little points, and we're going to talk about some of these, so it'll come up, I think.
Well, and I think regardless of what size you are, obviously if you're a newer church, a smaller church, this stuff will really hopefully apply. But even if you've been doing this a while and you're a large church, it might not be bad to hear some of these points just to kind of check and recheck, making sure that you're kind of moving in the right direction here, because sometimes you can get comfortable and not realize certain things maybe need to be changed or something. So let's just jump into it.
All right. So number one on our list is get wise counsel.
Get wise counsel. So this has to do with if you're involved in pastoral ministry and you may not have a business type of a mind, and that's fine. You know, a lot of people are in ministry because they're there to help people. They're not necessarily business people. It's real important that you surround yourself with some really wise counsel that you can trust, people that are trustworthy, and they can give you maybe some basic information when it comes to budgeting and financial documents at the church. And again, every church is a little different. My church, we have a leadership team meeting, and the pastor is involved in that leadership team meeting. And we do go over the financial things. We do go over the budgets,
Right.
and it's good for him to at least have a good idea, you know, what we're spending, what our budget is, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So there's elements that, I mean, if you don't have wise counsel and you go, I just don't care about any of that stuff,
Right.
you can make some really bad decisions about getting into
Yeah.
debt or not even realizing that
Right.
you're on a path that's not looking good
Sure.
if you don't know, basic assets and liabilities and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So
Yeah. So it's just good to have some wise people. And again, it's people you can trust, not necessarily the biggest givers in the church. You're not looking at that. You know, you're looking at just people that are maybe have a good track record financially, and you can talk with them. They're trustworthy, and, you know, they can give you some advice. So that would be the
Yeah.
first point, would get some wise counsel.
one of the pieces that ties into this, as we're going to get to later, but that wise counsel can be in the form of a board or something that you put together as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Yeah.
all right, moving on. We're past number one. We're going to number two.
Point number 2 here is, if you're in pastoral ministry, do not handle the money. And again, this is really not that you can't be trusted. Obviously, if you're a pastor, you should be able to be trusted, but it just doesn't look good if you're the person handling the finances, that are involved in the finances. That it's just not a healthy thing. It just doesn't look good from the outside, especially newer people. If you're involved in the money in some capacity, I mean, over the years, I've been in pastoral ministry, and I always had somebody else. When I was the senior pastor, I always had somebody else, count the money and make the deposit and, provide all that stuff.
Yeah.
I have a little part-time gig with the church. It's kind of small. I'm the executive pastor on that, and we do have people that count. In fact, I'll just tell you what we do. We actually have at least 2 people on our leadership team that count the offering. They count it.
Meaning at least 2 that do it every week, not
Every week.
necessarily. So that's a good policy as well.
Yeah.
It's just you have an accountability partner when you're going
Right.
through, especially if you're dealing with cash
Oh yeah.
and counting the money. You want to make sure that we felt like we got more money in, but not all the money's showing up.
Where's it at? Yeah.
Yes, that bucket was full, but
Now it's not.
yeah.
So we have 2 different people every week. So we have a leadership team that has about 8 people on it. And so those people rotate. So they're counting every week. They actually count. They record stuff on a document. They sign the document. And they do they put everything we have a little money bag and from the bank, and they do give me the money because I will take it, and then I will recount everything. I literally make copies. I scan documents, scan checks, scan deposit slips. Then I take it down the street or to the bank that I work with. And then I email those documents to people on the leadership team. And then, since we're just going into detail here, we have online giving, so we have PayPal. And so we have leadership people that have access to that PayPal account. They have access to our online banking. So they see everything. And when we have reports every month to our leadership team, there's a document that I have somebody else prepare that's in leadership. They prepare a spreadsheet with all the, here's what came in, here's the expenses, we have everything budgeted on this spreadsheet, right? So if we spend more money than then, like if the electric bill is higher than what we've budgeted, we know it. It's like, oh, the electric bill was $100 more this month. What's going on with that? Or if we spend money on some equipment or something, and we have so much budgeted, but with the spreadsheet, it may be over budget. So, there's this accountability that goes into this. And it sounds really detailed, and it is detailed, but if you have a system and going on it, it doesn't take very long. It's a system that just rolls along. And then when we actually have meetings, leadership team meetings, and go over the finances, which is part of our deal, it doesn't take very long. The people can see it. Everybody sees the spreadsheet. They can ask questions.
Yeah.
It goes along nicely.
It's just a healthier environment if it's not.
Yeah.
If you have a system in place that has some checks and balances in it, as opposed to, oh, the pastor grabs all the checks every Sundays and he counts them and he puts them in the bank account.
You don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's just
yeah.
It's not a good system, and it's gonna lead to problems.
It opens up, doors you don't want to open up. Now, I like the fact that you have multiple people, at least what we do, and I think your church does that as well. Although I do remember many, many years ago when I was on staff at your church over 20 years ago, we had a gal that handled the money. You remember Ani.
Yes.
And Ani's sweet gal, really wonderful person. She was getting up there in years, and there was a couple times where there was at least a couple times, maybe only twice, but there was one time in particular, somebody came in our church and said, "Hey, I found these checks like in your dumpster." I don't know how he found it or what the deal was, but there was checks that people had made out to the church, and somehow or another they got displaced and they were thrown away. And I can't remember, there was a number of them. It wasn't a large amount, but there was a number of these checks that were tossed by accident. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know how I can't remember the details, why the guy was in our dumpster, or how, maybe it was laying outside the dumpster. I don't think he was going through our dumpster. It was something about they were outside blowing in the wind or something. I don't know. But he found them and brought them to us. And, so I guess what I'm saying is mistakes happen. So if you only have one person that's doing this, even if they're trusted and all this, I mean, there's mistakes. Mistakes happen. I mean, I've corrected some mistakes on our spreadsheet when I've had two people count,
All right. Exactly. All right. So don't handle the money, huh? So our first point, yes.
If you're the senior pastor, I mean, if you're the executive pastor, that's another story, because usually executive, you're handling business and stuff. So,
right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. These are kind of geared towards senior pastor. So
right.
Get wise counsel, don't handle the money. Number 3 on our list here is let your leadership team or board handle the finances.
Yeah. And I kind of got into that, didn't I? I was talking a little bit about our process. Again, every church is a little different. Our process is I come up with a budget every year, and then I submit it to my board of directors, and they look at, and we just another name for leadership team. They look at everything, and they give their 2 cents. They say, well, you know what, you might want to add a little more money in maintenance here. The building needs this and that, and you might want to consider this. So they give me feedback on the budget. We come to an agreement with the budget, and then every month, as I was saying earlier here, again, this is what we do. They look at the finances every month. They look at the budget. They look at a spreadsheet, and they're the ones that I'm accountable to. And they're the ones that give us feedback.
Yeah, which is just a healthy setup. If I'm the senior pastor and I'm handling the finances and I have a big vision, I'm going to make some poor decisions, So we're going to go out and do this. And it's always good to have another group responsible for the finances and kind of set and check on, that would be great. We could do that, but or maybe we should go do this because we got, some funds for that. So it's just setting it up so that you have a separate set of people. And it's typically, I don't know how your board was made up, but we a lot of times would have business owners that were part of the board. So they understood profit and loss and how much, reserve cash you should have and things like that.
Yeah. Now, these are important things to, again, to really consider and look at, because that's part of church life, and people are trusting you. And we'll talk about that in a moment, but people are trusting you when they give. They're investing in your ministry, and so you need to make sure you handle it properly. And look, I understand boards and leadership teams, and sometimes you don't always agree totally on certain things. You may have somebody on your leadership team that might be, what can I say? They see things from a different perspective, and so you're kind of butting heads with them at times. But it's good. This is where communication is important.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, we've had some. I know on our board, there was one member that felt very strongly about that we needed a certain amount of margin in our operations.
Yeah.
And so, while not everyone agreed with him and the amount of margin we should have, it was healthy dialogue to discuss and consider. So
yeah, absolutely. These things are important, and so different perspectives are always important. And hopefully, you're building relationships there on your leadership team, and if you're the leader, the senior pastor, you can communicate well and build relationships, and things don't have to get ugly; they can be very positive. So, yeah. So where are we at here?
So we've got that 3: get wise counsel, don't handle the money, and then let your leadership team or board handle the finances. And number 4 is it's okay to speak about financials.
Yeah, I'm talking, when I put this on here, I'm looking at, when you're talking to your congregation is what I'm talking about.
Right.
I think it's important, again, for people to understand. I mean, one of the things, I've told this story before, but when I came on, this group I'm with right now was kind of a restart 6 years ago. And they never talked about money at all, ever. And they were running in the red every month. And I'm like, we can't keep doing this. We're going to run out of money here. We need to talk about what it takes to have a church, what it takes to have staff, what it takes to pay the bills, to have a facility. People, you would be surprised, the average probably church attender doesn't have I don't want to say doesn't have a clue. It sounds like I'm degrading them, but they don't really have a good understanding of what it costs to do church. And I remember, again, back in the old days with your church, I remember this guy, we rented this facility off Prince Road that you're very well aware of. And it was costing us at the time about $4,500 a month. And I remember one of our members he wasn't on the board or anything, but he's a regular member. He was shocked that we were paying $4,500 a month for rent. We leased a place. It was about 10,000 square feet. And he thought, well, I thought you'd only be paying like $400 or $500 a month.
Really?
No, it's $4,500 a month, not $400 a month. So again, I just highlight that because many times the average person doesn't really know, hey, we have costs, we have expenses, we have insurance, we have utilities, we have, expenses to put on a presentation. Most people don't get that. So it's really important to occasionally speak about finances. And I'm not talking about asking for money all the time. I'm just talking about what we do is we actually have a quarterly business meeting. We have a church-wide business meeting quarterly. Our bylaws say we need to have at least one annual business meeting. That's the bylaws. But we do it quarterly, and we just do it after church, after things are done. Hey, if you want to hang around for a few minutes, we're going to go over our little business meeting here. We're going to tell you what we're doing financially and what we've got coming up, not just financially, but coming up, other things happening, other events coming on. And so we do a little business meeting, 3 times a year. And again, it's just to bring up the fact that, hey guys, here's where we're doing financially. Here's what we need. Here's what's coming in, and here's what we got coming in the future.
Yeah. I was a part of a church in California that had a monthly meeting that was during, it was typically on the weekend, a Sunday, and it was typically involved the leadership, but others could attend as well.
Okay.
So, and that would be, one of the elements of just kind of figuring out where we're at, where we're going, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are, I think, very good things to do. And again, it's up to you how often you do it, but I think you need to do it. So, all right. So let's wrap this up with the next point. What is this? Point number 5? Is that what this is?
Be open and transparent.
So this kind of goes along with what we just talked about. I think it's okay to be open about where you're at financially as a church, what the general welfare of the church is. You don't have to go into nitty-gritty details.
Right.
But if you're, many churches are in the red, or at least they have high rent payments and those kind of things. And I think it's okay to talk about those things and to share where, as a senior pastor and maybe as a leadership team, where you guys are at on those things, and just being open and being honest and being transparent.
Right. So you don't want to get in a situation where, all of a sudden 1 month or a few weeks, you're like, oh, we've got locked out of our facility here when, no one knew what was going on,
That's, that reminds me of, we won't talk about it here on the podcast, but I remember that happened not too long ago to a church I used to work at. But anyhow, and things come up. Look, the unexpected expenses come up. Maybe you've got your air conditioning system breaks down and all of a sudden you got a bill for $6,000.
Right.
Those things come up, and I think it's okay to let people know, hey guys, or whatever else might be popping up, so that people can at least have access. They're in the know. And again, whenever you're open and transparent with people, it builds relationship. It builds trust. And, if you're just keeping everything hush hush, even if there's nothing really going on, you just don't want to talk about anything, it creates potential problems down the road a ways. But if you have a track record of being just open and honest with people about things, it builds trust, it builds relationship. And so when things get tough, and everybody goes through tough times, when things get tough, at least people will be like, well, we trust this guy, we know this guy or this gal, whoever it might be that's leading the church.
Right. And they'll know, and just avoid surprises. Because if you get a surprise, then there's an integrity loss and trust loss, right. And yeah. Yep.
Those kind of things are just not healthy things. So anyhow, I hope this has been some help. I know it's a topic that many times we just gloss over as people involved in church, but I think the finances are important, and I think that hopefully this podcast will, at least if you've been doing this a long time, at least you can kind of look at some of these things we talked about and see where you're at on this. And especially if you're a newer church, it's real important to put some of these things, or at least similar things, in practice.
Exactly.
All right. Anything else to add?
No, I was just trying to, think back on horror stories from the past and how they may have been avoided. And I talked about some of them in the beginning. I think if you apply these principles, you're going to be in good shape.
I think for the most part you will be. It's important stuff to at least consider and look over. So if you have any thoughts, and you being those of you listening and watching this on YouTube, or watching this or listening to us on iTunes or at streamingchurch.tv in the archive area, if you have any thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Support@streamingchurch.tv is a good email to use. Support@streamingchurch.tv. And if you disagree with some of this, we'd love to get your feedback. Constructive criticism is always good, and you may have a good point. You probably won't be right because you're disagreeing with me, but we'll listen to you. I'm being facetious, of course, but all right. So we're done. Good enough?
Good enough. Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Jackson. Appreciate your time here. That's Steve's first name is Jackson. People don't know that. Now you do. All right. Well, look, he is Jackson Stephen Lacy. I am Philip E. Thompson, better known as Phil. And we appreciate your time today listening to the Church Solutions podcast. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time. We will catch you again next time. Take care.